We're back for another episode of the Giants Huddle Podcast. John Schmeelk with you. Today's guest, we're joined by Eric Crocker. But first, want to remind everybody, you can find the Giants Huddle Podcast on the Giants mobile app on your favorite podcast platforms. And, of course, at giants.com/podcast, along with our other podcasts on our Giants Podcast Network, presented by Investors Bank. And now we're joined by our guest. He is former NFL defensive back, Eric Crocker. You can find him on Twitter at Eric_Crocker. Eric, how are you, man? Welcome to the show.
Oh, man, I'm great, man. Just ready to talk some football.
Absolutely. We do a lot of draft spots leading up to the draft, a lot of guys that watch tape, but I always like to talk to guys that played the position and can actually relate their experiences on the field to how they evaluate players. So we're going to lock in here on the wide receivers and DBs a little bit, because obviously you're a DB and you played against wide receivers. So you know what gives guys trouble and things of that nature. So
that's a really good point too, because that's really like the basis of what I go off of. I kind of use myself as a kind of like I don't want to say a standard, but I use myself as a starting point, and then I build off of that from the corner perspective and the receiver perspective. So that was a good point there.
Yeah, absolutely. We have David Deal and Shona Harrett in-house with us here, and I love talking to him about O-line play and pass rushers, because I think those are the guys that kind of give you the best insight because they've done it. So let's start with this. As a DB, when you approach the wide receiver position, you watch the guys on tape during the week, what were the things that gave you the most trouble, that the first thing you kind of zeroed in on, like, all right, this guy is really good at that, and that could pose a problem for me?
I'd say how he is at the line of scrimmage. Obviously everybody's different. I think the scariest guy is like the big guy that's also quicker and strong at the line of scrimmage, like a DK Metcalf, right? Like a lot of people, they kind of pigeonhole him into this guy that couldn't move laterally. But if they really watch DK Metcalf, they notice he had really good releases, his feet, his hands, really quick. Everything was explosive. Like that's one of the hardest guys to guard. And then also the smaller guys, like everybody makes a big deal out of like Devontae Smith being so small. And how's he going to defeat press? Those are the hardest guys to press, especially for someone like me that was a 6'1", 6'2", 198-pound cornerback.
Now, for the people that don't know, by the way, Eric played DB for the Jets for a year, also won an AFL championship, right? So he has a lot of experience playing DB. So let's start with this class. A lot of people have different opinions on the top of this class, going down the line, who they like the best. How do you round out the top of this year's wide receivers class in terms of the guys you like the most?
Oh, man. So there's one guy, I haven't finalized like my top 5, 6 guys yet, because I haven't watched Rashad Bateman yet. So I'm kind of waiting to like really kind of put out my official like final rankings of receivers. But I'll just say like at the top, like my top 3, which I think I'm pretty sold on, I'd say Devontae Smith at 1. And I know there's a lot of people that are just like, Jamar Chase can't miss, like all that. And like when I watch him, like obviously he's terrific. I think he kind of gets thrown around with like the generational tag and all that. And I'm like, like I just see guys like they're too comfortable getting hands on him. They're too comfortable running with him through routes. Now, obviously he does some terrific things at the catch point. I think he's really strong there. I think his hands are really good. I think his balance and his ability to kind of adjust to passes in the air, I think he does all that extremely well. But to me, if you ask me who would I rather guard, I would say I'd rather guard Jamar Chase over Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith, he's more fluid at the line of scrimmage, quicker. He gives you more to think about. You have to be more on point with your feet and your hands. Really with him, as much as people talk about getting hands on him, you have to really play more with your feet first to get you in position to play with your hands, because he is so quick and fluid at the line of scrimmage. And a lot of times with guys like that, if you try hard to get hands on, you end up locking your hips. And if you miss, he's gone. So with him, you have to be more patient. It gives you more to think about. And you have to really be really good on that route to be in position to contest the pass at the catch point. With Chase, I know I'm going to be in position to make the play. Now I just can't let him dog me at the catch point, which we've seen that go both ways. We've seen him dog the best of guys, whether it was Trevon Diggs, AJ Terrell, on those guys. But then I've also seen him really compete at the catch point where I'm like, damn, like he has to win like that. He's the first person I've seen lose the same way he wins. That's typically not what you see from guys. And everybody notices the big plays, and all those. But when guys really challenged him, to me, it was more hit or miss, whether he was going to win that route or that rep or not. And I think other guys just win a higher percentage of routes in the sense of just beating the guy and giving the defensive back more to think about. So obviously Chase, terrific prospect. I don't want to come off as like some hot take guy or anything like that. But I just, in my opinion, if I had to guard one or the other, I would rather guard Chase because I know at the end of the day I'm going to be in position to make the play. Then it's just on me to make the play. So those are kind of the top two guys and how I think about those guys.
I want to follow up on Chase for a second because I thought one interesting thing from his pro day, he measured with under 31-inch arms, which is short for a wide receiver. And I know one thing you focused on when you did your video breakdown on your Twitter account on Chase was his inability sometimes to get off a press, and guys were willing to press him. They got up on him. And I think when you watch Chase, which is interesting, he doesn't create that obvious separation that other guys do in his routes, right? He's solid. He gets past guys, but his windows that he creates for quarterbacks is smaller. But to your point, he's able to make those contested catches. I kind of compare him a little bit to DeAndre Hopkins that way, right? He's not the quickest guy, not the fastest guy, but if he's got an inch, he's got 2 feet on you, right? It's
right.
kind of, that's how you look at it. So what do you think that arm length thing, do you think it has to do with his ability to get off the line and just how you kind of balance out his total package, even though he doesn't get that kind of great separation you see from a guy like Smith, a guy like Waddle, guys like that?
I think it just comes like, does he have not so much the arms? It's really more of, does he have the suddenness and the twitch? And I've seen it at times, so I know it's kind of there, but I think he has to work on becoming more consistent with that part of his game. Like the twitchiness, the suddenness, the ability to kind of get outside the cornerback's frame to really get the cornerback to move this way so he can come back that way. And if he can learn to do that, then we're talking about how people view him, and maybe he didn't do that a lot. I mean, we're talking about somebody that was 19 years old, putting up the all-time production in the SEC. So that's impressive in itself. But even then, I view it as, hey, like, how is he winning? How does that translate to the NFL? And it's a little bit tougher for me to project that because it's so much bully ball that he played.
Sure.
And I just need to see a little bit more suddenness and twitch. And now the big question is, does he possess the suddenness and twitch to really be able to do that? Or is he just going to be in a dogfight every time he gets up at the line of scrimmage? Those are things I have kind of questions about. Really has to do more just with his nuanced releases at the line of scrimmage. I think he can really improve on that.
Simply from a play perspective, we know about Devontae Smith, 170 pounds. Can he deal with contact in the NFL? Sustaining injuries, things like that. Let's push that aside because nobody really knows, right? They can guess, but nobody knows how he's going to deal with all that stuff. He was healthy all his career at Alabama, by the way. So simply as a player, if you see a guy that's lighter in their mass, he's very slim, isn't very broad, a narrow type of body. As a corner, is there stuff that you can take advantage of with that? Or does it come back to what you kind of said in your first answer where those guys are more difficult to deal with simply from trying to beat them in coverage?
Yeah, when you watch the film, there isn't anything that jumps out that there's a weakness.
No, I agree with you, by the way. I'm with you on that. And
that's what I challenge people to kind of ask themselves, like, all right, like, take away the fact that he's 170 pounds. Because when I watch film, I try not, I knew what his height and weight was, but I try not to know what somebody's height and weight is because I just want their film to tell me who this person is, not their height, not their weight. I think that's how a lot of people miss out on the exceptions, right? They look at DK Metcalf and it's like, well, look at this 3-cone, can't do this, can't do that. But it's like, well, what does he do well? Like, let's look at that. And he does those things at an elite level. So when you look at Devontae Smith, it's like, all right, like you said, throw the weight out the window, throw his body, like, what does he do well? And when you put on the film and you take notes, he does everything well. It's not until you know that he's 170 pounds or whatever that people start like making up these things and trying to project that. But those things have not been an issue even against like the top corners in the league. We're talking about Derek Stingley, who's probably going to be the number one corner off the board next year. He destroyed him in every way, like whether it was releases off the line, whether it was contested catch, whether it was just running by him. He beat him every which way that you can beat somebody. And he's done that consistently to everybody in the SEC or all of college football. So my thing is like, I hear it. And I know that people are saying that he's going to be an outlier if he is good. But my thing is, I just go off of the film and what I see, and I let that tell me the story. His weight has not looked like an issue aside from him blocking. Now, from in that's when if people want to talk about his weight, his blocking, if somebody really wanted to, they can just throw him out the way. Now, I was watching film on like Eric Stokes, and I kind of knocked Eric Stokes for this because I'm like, look, Devontae Smith tries to block. He does try, and he blocked Eric Stokes several times. And I'm like, you can't let that happen. There's no way you can let a 170-pound receiver block you. Now, we're not talking about him trying to make you miss in space. It's just like, hey, this is just me and you. And you have to get this guy out the way. I think if there is an area where his weight might hurt him, that's where it's at in the blocking game. I wouldn't ask him to be doing too much blocking. I'm not throwing a screen to a receiver and saying, hey, Devontae Smith, you block that guy, which they did that at Bama, but that's just not something I would really like for him to do. I don't think that's, but aside from that, I just challenge somebody to show me on film where his weight has ever been an issue against any caliber of cornerback. And when I mean that by that is they like, I can show you exactly where, when I talk about Jamar Chase and his inability to separate and how it's really hit and miss when you just watch the all 22 and you watch and don't watch the highlights. It's very hit and miss. With Devontae Smith, there is no hit and miss. He's just winning and winning and winning and winning and winning every which way.
And to give fans an idea, because you've mentioned this before, and I know how you do it, but the fans should know too, you're not just watching catches, you're watching full games of all 22 to break down your analysis, right?
Yes, several games. I usually go, so most of the time with a guy, it takes me about one game, maybe two, to at the very least understand who this guy is. And then I'll continue to watch games just to make sure, okay, well, what's consistent? Because this is why, and I don't watch any highlights of guys before the draft or as I'm doing my analysis, because I don't want highlights to paint a false narrative of who this player is. Like, anybody can pull 10, 15 plays over 3 years of a player and make somebody look like something. But when you watch the all 22, it's like, hey, this is 70, 60 plays or whatever of just pure this guy. And I want to know what exactly he struggles with and what is he, consistent with. So yeah, it's not, I'm definitely watching the all 22 and letting that paint the picture of the player for me.
How about Jalen Waddle? What do you see as his role here? Is he going to be a guy that it's mostly, quick screen line of scrimmage, get him in space and then over the top? Or is he going to be a guy that can win with a fuller route tree, intermediate area, over the middle? How do you see him translating his game and his enormous physical talents to the NFL level?
Oh man, he does some freaky stuff. And the funny thing is, people don't talk about him being like a smaller guy because he's only like 5'10", 180. Like, he's not a big guy. But he's another one where I think he plays, and I got a lot of flack from the the analytics world. When I talk about receivers, I say, hey, this guy plays big or he plays small. And you can be any size and play big. Whether you're 6'3", 220, you can still play big. If you're 5'10", 180, you can still play big. I think he played big above the rim, especially at the catch point. That was something really good to see, especially for somebody that's more of a speedster. I don't throw out the Tyreek Hill tag on people. You hear that every year, whether it's John Ross or Ruggs, and no, Ruggs was a long strider. He wasn't as twitchy as sudden as a Tyreek Hill. I didn't feel like he consistently used the threat of his speed vertically in route. That's why he had so much trouble with guys like Fulton. That's why he's having trouble in the NFL. But when you watch Waddle, that's the closest thing to Tyreek Hill that you're going to see, because he has that twitch, that suddenness, that ability to explode right now. I was listening to Chris Sims, and it was really weird. He was like, oh, he's not straight line fast. I think he's going to run 4.45. And I'm like, what? Like, what guy are you watching? That's not what I'm seeing. Yeah, he was saying he's like not first straight line fast, and there are a bunch of guys in this class faster than him. I thought that was a really interesting statement. Not knocking him. I think Chris Sims really does his work. But I see something totally different. I see someone who is just as explosive as Ruggs after the catch, being able to outrun angles and explode past guys. I've seen people try to bracket him, and him just run straight through a bracket and be able to track in the ball. I think he has terrific ball skills, tracking in passes. And then I think his route running is really good. The crazy thing with him, I was watching him in 2019 against LSU, and he was in the slot. And it was actually the play where Devontae Smith caught a go route down the sideline on Stingley when he jumped over Stingley and adjusted and caught the ball. Well, if you kind of go back to the right side of that field in the slot there, you'll see Waddle hit Delpit with this. I mean, he came in full. He kind of stemmed inside, and then he hit him with what we call a rocker step, where he went left, right, and left, and he did it like without losing any speed. And I was like, whoa, that's special. That's different. Just right there, that was different. And I've seen that on numerous occasions. He played primarily in the slot, but he had Eric Stokes over him on this play out of the slot. And he ran like a simple kind of like a slant route. But when he put his foot in the ground, he separated from Stokes so much. And we're talking about Stokes, who is a 4.25 guy, right? He separated him by like 6-7 yards. Whereas like, okay, he has some different stuff to him, a different type of juice. So I think he kind of really gives you a complete package of receiver as well. It would have been nice to see him work more on the outside so we can see him consistently like, okay, can he win vertically, just line up on the outside? You assume he can, but that wasn't something I was really able to see.
How do you compare this group and we'll stick with the top of the class mostly, compared to last year's top of the class? How do you group these guys together? How would you rank them?
Okay, so I like the top of this class more. Now, I think last year you had a deeper, more depth, like day 2, day 3.
Sure.
And there were certain guys like, like I probably would take like Michael Pittman and Brian Edwards, who was a 3rd-round pick, over like Rondale Moore, But when you're talking about the top guys, I'd say Devontae Smith, I'd take him number 1 over the last 2 classes. I just think he's that good. Now, the only pause, obviously, his weight. But again, if you just go off of what my notes say, the weight's not an issue. So I factor that in, and I'd say, like, that's the guy I would take first. And anybody listening to this, I just show me where the weight is an issue. Show me, well, except for block. I know the blocking is. But at any other
Eric, you've had this argument with people before. I can tell, I think.
All the time. I mean, it's like, oh, the weight, 170. Oh, my God. And I'm just like, oh, my God. Okay. But so he would be first. And then I would say probably Chase, because he just does some special things. And then I've kind of come along on him and just try to look past the like, okay, and try to project more. Like, all right, Eric, this is what you're seeing. And I know it's not pretty, but let's project this to the next level. And can he get better at the suddenness and twitchiness and quickness and craftiness of playing the receiver position? I think he can. So I'm going to put him at 2. And then I would go Lamb. And then I would go Diami Brown, maybe.
Ooh.
And then like Judy, Jefferson, and then the rest of the guys from there. Oh, Waddle.
And then you have Waddle around Judy's area.
Yeah, Waddle right in there. Yeah.
All right, I got to ask about De'Ami Brown now, because I was going to jump to that 2nd tier of guys, and I happen to really like De'Ami Brown, and I don't know why people have him in like the middle end of the 2nd round. The dude averaged more than 20 yards per catch for 2 straight years. He just runs by people all game. Why do you like him so much?
I'll tell you what it is. What people are seeing is, so I'm watching him, right? I'm breaking him down. And I tweet out something. I'm just like, man, like the tough thing about watching De'Ami Brown, I was like, he only runs like 3 routes. I was like, this reminds me of DK Metcalf coming out of LSU, Ole Miss. And the responses I got was, it's the same offensive coordinator. And I'm like, wow, okay, it makes a lot of sense. So I had to really dig deep in my analysis on him, but he does some really good things. I mean, and I had to, you got to really focus in. And I think some people, they just watch it. And it's like, okay, well, he did this well. But when you really watch and try and nitpick and see who exactly this kid De'Ami Brown is, his feet are terrific. He has really good feet. He has really good craftiness. I talked about that with like Chase, like developing that craftiness. I think this guy off the line, really fluid, works, knows how to stack defensive backs. He gives them half steps. He does all these little subtleties in his game, and you have to really look and find it. But once you do it and you understand why he's winning vertical, those are the things I feel like that makes him special. I think his ability to make contested catches, again, I don't look at the height and weight before I watch him. So I'm watching him, and he's looking like a 6'3", 215-pound dude. Now he measures in, I see at 6'1", 190, but okay, I've already made my analysis of him. I don't care about the weight part of it. I'm looking at him, and I'm like, this guy is like a carbon copy of Devontae Adams and what Devontae Adams brings to the Packers. That's what I see, and that's what the ability I see from Diami Brown. It's really good. Run after catch. He's physical. He'll lower his shoulder. He does all these things like, he knows how to, understands leverage. Sometimes I see him moving at one speed, and then he knows how to just attack the leverage and then come back out just to make the cornerback speed turn. Like just the little subtleties of his game. I think he's very nuanced. You just couldn't see it on full display because of the offense that he was in. I do feel like if there's one knock on him, I would say one thing that was like not consistent to me was his ability to use his vertical speed, because he can run, but to use his vertical speed as a threat on underneath routes. Sometimes he would just kind of run one speed and get to a spot and catch it, and it's like, okay, that's cool. And then sometimes I'd see him really attack, step on the defensive back toes, boom, sit it down, show his numbers, and he works back to the ball better than anybody I've seen. Like maybe now the Alabama receivers work back well as well, but he works back extremely well. So he's like quarterback's best friend. There was a couple times against like Virginia, I watched him work back to the ball like 10 yards, like on the comeback. So like those are the, that's somebody that's confident with his hands, his ability, does a lot of really good things. But I think he can use the threat of that speed of the vertical speed to work his underneath routes a little bit more. Aside from that, I'd see a lot of big time potential in Diami Brown. And whatever team he goes to, I think the fans are gonna be like, whoa, how do we miss on this guy?
One guy that I struggle with a little bit is Terrace Marshall. I watch him and I see the physical tools and I see what he can be, but there's something missing to me. I don't know if it's a burst or whatever it is. Croc, what do you see when you look at Terrace Marshall? Because he's 6'2", he runs a 4.38. You can check every box in the physical package you want. But what did you think of him when you watched him on tape? Because that could be a guy, if the Giants don't go wide receiver in the first round, if he falls down to 42, maybe that's a guy they could try to snag.
Yeah, he reminded me, he was kind of a mixture of a couple guys. So he was like Mohamed Sanu meets Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Did I say his name right?
Yeah.
It was like a combination of the two, right? Like he's like this sleek mover. I thought he ran routes well. I thought he had really good feet. He doesn't have like really good burst, like in and out of his breaks or anything like that. But he definitely shows like the ability to do everything. Like he can stretch the field, whether it's from the outside, from the slot. Again, talked about his feet. I think he has good quickness and suddenness, but I think what you're seeing is kind of like that lack of burst. And you don't see that. Now you do see, there's times you'll see him run by a defense. I mean, I think it was Wake Forest where he just ran straight past everybody and caught it and just ran off to the end zone. So he has that ability, but I just don't think you see that right now. And you guys are used to seeing like Odell Beckham. I don't think he has that. So I think his play style is more like a Slayton type,
Yeah, I always struggle with those long striders sometimes. Sometimes they fool me when they got those big steps, they don't do the chop, and it gets me sometimes.
Yeah. He's good, though. I think he's well-rounded. I really liked his ability to play in the slot and work outside. He primarily worked outside in the prior year with Jefferson doing all the slot work. Then this year he moved to where they just used him wherever they can give him the ball. And I thought his production was off the charts, terrific in the 7 games before opting out. I think he's another guy that's kind of rounding out my top 5, top 6. I like him enough to have him in that range over some of the other guys where people like Rondale Moore and, Elijah Moore. I don't think Elijah Moore plays like fast enough for me. He runs fast, but when you just watch him, he doesn't really use the threat of that speed like enough for somebody who is more of a speed guy.
All right, final question on the wide receivers before we jump to the DBs. You mentioned a couple of the guys already, Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore. I'm going to go on the list. Shi Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Kadarius Toney, Dwayne Eskridge to an extent. You got all these guys that are, basically going to play the slot, right? And they all kind of like the smaller stature type of wide receivers. They got speed, they got quickness. Which guys from that group stick out to you above the others? Because there's how it is. There's a million 5'11" guys that run a 4.44 now coming out of college every year. There just is.
Especially with no combine this year, just to play.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly.
I haven't watched the Eskridge kid yet. He's from like Western Michigan, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've seen clips. Definitely looks explosive. I've just seen people kind of like Jim Nagy tweet out a video of him like, whoo, that dude's skating out there. Like you can tell he's just naturally fast. But I haven't watched anything else on him. And again, I don't watch highlights, so I haven't like looked into it there until I get my analysis. But the other guys, I think Moore is kind of special. I think he has some special stuff from the slot. Oh, Rondale? Yeah, excuse me. Rondale Moore. Yeah. I know he's only 5'7", but I think just in the role that he could play, he has the nice feet, quickness, suddenness, twitch. I watched him as a true freshman against what's the kid number 24 from Wade from Ohio State,
Yeah,
and he
Wade,
just killed him. And he killed him with just that nice, quick twitch, suddenness. He's really strong. I don't think he minds at all. Going over the middle, he can catch a pass, take some punishment, and we've seen him run off for touchdowns. He does all these little things. Like what I want from today's slot, the ability to take the end arounds and do the jet sweeps and all that, use him in that manner. I think he's definitely a utility guy, like a Deebo Samuel, but with even more upside as a burner, as a pure burner. So with him, I think you just need to keep him healthy. I think that's what people say one of his issues is, aside from only being 5'7". But I think as just a receiver, like you look at him as a receiver and what he can be as a slot for your team, I think he can be big time, really working over that area. Now, obviously in college, sometimes it's a little hard to evaluate pure slots like him that only line up in the slot because all their matchups are more favorable.
Yeah, no
they're
press
matched up
coverage,
against linebackers.
like that, yeah.
They're matched up against linebackers, safeties. There's a lot of space. And then when you're just that quick and twitchy, when you go back to the Ohio State, you see them press him a lot. And you saw how he dealt with it there. And I'm like, oh, no issues. All
right, let's jump over to cornerback now. I was all on the Caleb Farley bandwagon until this last injury, and now the ACL 2 backs, I'm freaked out and I'm off. But if you take those injuries out of the mix, I've never seen a guy with makeup speed like that. You see wide receivers run by him, and he just turns on the jets, closes, catches up, does all that stuff. How do you view the top of this cornerback class? And you can throw Farley into the mix too, as always healthy, with Horn, Surtain, Farley, and those guys.
So it's tough because Farley, I see him as clearly someone who has freakish upside. Like it's just like freakish, his ability. You talked about his ability to close on the ball in the air. To me, someone asked me like, well, who does it remind you of? And I'm like, man, I can't really think of anybody except for Deion Sanders. And I don't want to throw that name out lightly, right? And I'm not saying he's Deion Sanders just with his coverage ability, but when that ball's in the air and the way he's able to explode and the way he attacks the ball in the air, like those type of ball skills, the way he does that looks like Deion Sanders. Aside from that, I thought with Farley, he was just far too inconsistent. A lot of it, I think, is just like him being a little green. Everybody it's like, oh, he just perfect, like shutdown. I'm like, no, he's not a shutdown corner yet. Now, maybe he can be. I know he's a little raw in the sense of, I think it was like a high school quarterback, I want to say.
Yeah, I think he only played the position for 2 years. That's it.
Yeah, was a receiver when he first got to Virginia Tech, then went over the corner. So, he's kind of new to it. In corner, there's a lot of feel that comes with that position. Like you start feeling things and having a feel for how receivers run routes and understanding when to sit things down. So once he gets that, then we start talking as, okay, I see. So somebody might take him first or before the back end. I don't know. I'm scared of the back injury as well. But before that, somebody might take him first. I didn't have him as my number one guy. But if you ask me who has the highest upside of anybody in this group, I would say him. And if he's like the best corner in the NFL in 3 years, I wouldn't be surprised. But it's just a lot of risk there, but I guess risk reward. I love J.C. Horn. So that's been my CB1 since I really started diving into guys. I just think his mentality, he has these things that you can't teach with the way that he approaches the game. And that's the hard part for a lot of teams. They want to know, like people are like, oh, this guy was a bust or this guy was a bust. A lot of times the teams didn't evaluate the talent wrong. They evaluate the person and, if he's going to work hard once he gets money, how is he going to be? Is he an alpha guy? Well, is he soft? How is he going to respond to adversity? And when you look at J.C. Horn, he exemplifies everything that you want in like a CB1. Everybody points to the Auburn game. That wasn't the game plan. Hey, you go take Seth Williams. That was him saying, I'm guarding Seth Williams. Like, put me on him. That's their guy. Put me on him. And guys that go out of their way to like just do what's best for the team and feel like, hey, I got this ability and I can eat this dude up. And he did. He made it rough on him. I know people talk about his ball skills, whatever. His coverage skills is what stands out most to me. He's able to cover any type of receiver. I thought he did a good job on Elijah Moore, which guys like him that are 6 foot, 6'1", 205 pounds, a lot of times it's harder to mirror match guys in the slot that are 5'9", 180 pounds and run 4.3s. I thought he guarded him. I thought he did very well. Now, some people might point to the Alabama game the year prior. I thought he struggled a little bit with Devontae Smith. I think Devontae Smith's the best receiver in the last 2 years. So like, okay, he's struggling with Devontae Smith. I get it. Like, but even then, and when I say struggled, everybody might point to the slant route that went for a touchdown. I thought he was there. He looked like he maybe peaked and then it was over. But there were some other things that I watched from that game that you can probably only see on all 22 because it was away from the ball. But I just noticed that he was a little too worried about Devontae Smith going vertical, and he was playing too far upfield shoulder. Devontae Smith was sent routes down, and he kept drifting upfield. So that was one thing. I know, but then there's other plays in that game where he's playing off coverage against the Devontae Smith, which is extremely hard. Nice backpedal, gets out of his break, boom, punches the ball out, for an incomplete pass. So you're like, okay, I'm seeing him compete from off coverage, press. Obviously, he lost some reps, but he's still competing. Then there was a play on the goal line where he was communicating with everybody, getting everybody set up, and then they tried to high-low him. He took away the flat route, flipped his hips, knocked away the corner route. Like, you see him start doing those things and just understanding what his mentality is and what you see consistently on film. It's hard to say that there's somebody better than him in this class or that projects better at the next level. And then my next guy, I know everybody likes Surtain a whole lot, but I really like Greg Newsome. Now, his injuries, that's another thing. I don't know. I'm not a doctor or anything, medical staff, but just the film, like I think he's the most well-rounded, most scheme versatile corner in this class. His ability to play press is pretty much just as good as anybody else. I might not be as consistent as Surtain. Surtain makes it look really easy, but for the most part, like his press is really good. I did a terrific job reading guys down and not being scared of the vertical threat from receivers. I thought he did a really good job with his feet. I thought from off coverage, he was just as good as he was press coverage, which I'm watching him again. I don't look at height, weight measurables or anything. I'm looking at him on film and I'm like, okay, this is a 5'10", 180-pound guy. He's 6 foot 192 or whatever. That's what he measures in there. So I'm like, dang, he has a size. He moves like a small guy. And anytime you move like a small guy, that's definitely a plus for somebody that has legit size like he does. So his ability to play off and challenge himself in speed, in space, and play with his feet, that was terrific. Playing the ball at the catch point, no matter the size of the receiver, that was terrific. Can be a little grabby, but and same thing with Horn. I don't mind the grabbiness as much. I know some people do, but it's like receivers push off. You got to grab sometimes. Like, it's just a battle. You're more likely to get flagged as a cornerback, but it just kind of is what it is. It's a tough position to play, whatever. So he has some flags, whatever. But just his pure ability, I loved his game. Again, most scheme versatile corner in this class, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is he can go play for the Broncos. He can go play for the 49ers. He can go play for the Giants. No matter what your scheme is, cover 4 scheme, cover 3 press bail scheme, he can play in it. So I really like him a lot. And then Surtain, I'll touch on Surtain real quick. Why I'm not as high. I mean, I'm high, clearly. I have him at like CB3, right? I really like his ability. I think he's probably the most consistent press corner I've seen in recent years. He lacks that suddenness and twitchiness.
Yep.
And there are a lot of people that were questioning his speed. And I was telling people, no, it's not his speed. That's not what you guys are seeing a lack of. And they're like, oh, well,
change of direction,
slow.
right? Change of direction.
Yeah, it's his change of direction, it's his quickness, his twitchiness. That's what you're seeing a lack of there. So I feel like, I would have liked to see him against his receivers. Like, let me see you against Devontae Smith. Let me see that practice film, you against Jerry Jeudy. I think just his suddenness, his twitch, like he moves at one speed all the time. So again, I think he's going to be a terrific prospect. I'd expect him. I mean, if he was the first corner taken, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Again, a lot of my rankings go more off of my preference and not how everybody else should think. But when I watch him, terrific press guy. I just think from off coverage, I was watching him in the bail. I didn't think he was really anticipating and reading down routes very well and reacting to it right now. I thought if he's playing like cover 2, yeah, he click and close and diagnose things in front of him very well. Close, make tackles. He's a physical, aggressive tackler. All that's great. But I would like to see a little bit more suddenness, twitchiness from him. But definitely, I thought he played well. And he played a lot in the nickel too, like in previous years. There was a game like Duke, he played primarily like in the nickel. So he has that aspect, but even then, the nickel, how he was asked to play at Bama in comparison to how they'll ask him to play at the NFL, 2 totally different things.
No, I'm with you. I agree with everything you said about Surtain. He's not manning up some 5'11" quick slot receiver in the NFL. It's just not.
Ideally, I don't think that's, and I'm not going to say he can't, but that's not an ideal matchup for him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I want to go back to Horn for a second. Two things. One, I agree 100%. You're not going to find a guy that can, in one game, cover Elijah Moore, and then the next game go cover Kyle Pitts and actually cover both guys, do a pretty good job, right? That's not going to happen very often. You mentioned the grabbiness, because that is one thing that I notice and other people have too. Is that something you can coach out of a guy a little bit? Because there's no legal contact in college, as you know, you do have that in the NFL. Is that something once a defensive backs coach in the league gets his hands on him with his physical traits? I think he tested 95th percentile on all his testing at his pro day. Again, it's not combine, it's pro day, it's different, but still, can you coach that out of him given his physical gifts where he's not a guy that has to grab to stay with these guys? It's just something that he does.
I think it has to do more with the training. Like in the off season. I think everybody thinks like these NFL guys, they get to the or these kids coming from college, go to the NFL, and it's like, oh, they're going to develop you. But at the NFL level, they really focus more on developing your mind.
Right.
Like they want to do whatever they have to do to get you on the field to be able to get you ready for the next game. Your trainers in the off season, the guys that work with you there, like that's going to focus in more on your technique and creating good habits. So when it comes to JC Horn, he's working with Oliver Davis. He's this terrific defensive back trainer. He's out of Atlanta. He's doing an awesome job, not just working with him, but I mean, Eric Stokes. I watched him working with Jalen Ramsey. Then you have Horn working with Jalen Ramsey. But it's that, like, just getting him to trust his feet and work with your feet more to get you in position to use your hands. I think once he does that and gets consistent at that's when you'll see him maybe stop being as grabby and depending more on, let me grab to get him in position. It's like, no, trust your feet. You got the speed. Like even before that pro day 40, like I thought he was going to be a 4.45 guy. So, that's fine. That's more than fast enough. Explosive player. So yeah, I think he's going to be fine there. But I think that the work to stop being as grabby, it starts in your off-season training with like a personal guy. NFL, they prepare you more to get in the game.
Can you talk about the mental adjustment? Because we've seen some really good college cornerbacks. Jeffrey Okudah last year, for example. I mean, you watch him, you couldn't find much wrong with the guy. So he struggled in his first year. Somebody described it to me, going from corner in college to playing corner in the pros is like trying to drink water out of a fire hose. There's just so much coming at you, and it's just hard to take everything in because it's so much more complicated. What is that transition like, and why do even the best college corners have a bit of a slower process than other positions trying to play that spot in the pros?
Oh man. It's difficult. So when I got to the Jets, right, I'm coming from a Division II school where we primarily played like a couple of coverages, cover 3 and like cover 1, right? There wasn't like a whole lot of versatility with it. And then and then I went to the Arena League. So you have that, which is a totally different game. Then I get to the NFL, I get to the New York Jets, and Rex Ryan, it was everything. And just the verbal part of it is difficult if it's not something that you've heard. So you have to learn that part of it. Then you have to understand that there's like each coverage, you play a certain thing a different way. So whether I'm in man, I play this stack a different way. If I'm in zone, I play this stack a different way. And even on the zone is different because if it's a fire zone, I play it this way. If it's sky, I play it this way. And you have to be able to figure these things out right now, because it can be something and you're lined up and there's 2 guys there and you're like, okay, I'm good. But then a back motions to one side, that changes things. Then the guy motions over and makes it 3 guys in the stack. And then that changes things. And then the ball snapped and you're like, okay. And you have to kind of remember like, okay, well, not man. This is fire zone. So then you have to really get down that part of it. And I think that's the most difficult part. Now for me, it might've been more difficult because I went to a Division II and in the Arena League. Now I'm coming in, the verbiage is totally different. For Okudah, I didn't think the Lions were a good fit for him. And I was saying that before, like if I'm the Lions, I don't take him. Really, if I'm the Lions and I want to do things with Okudah, like I did with Darius Slayton, they put a lot of responsibility on Slay. But if I'm going to put those same type of, that's not Okudah's game. Let him play on the outside. Let him press from there, or let him press bail, read concepts down. I thought watching his film, he played press bail and reading concepts from there, as well as it looked like Josh Norman in that Super Bowl run with the Panthers. Like it was next level. Have him do that. I didn't think he was a guy that I want like and you're just going to match on this guy, or I'm going to line you up anywhere in the slot on the outside, and he's going to consistently excel from there. And so if I'm the Lions, like, I think the guy you wanted was Henderson. Now we'll see how the Lions adjust, and they got a new staff coming in and everything. And Aaron Glenn, I want to say, the defensive coordinator, I think, for there now.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was a scout when I was with the Jets. He wasn't even like a coach. He was just a scout. So I had conversations with him. But we'll see what he brings to the table in the sense of like the coverages. I know if it's anything like they ran in New Orleans, and I know he was just the defensive back coach. A lot of times, if you're just a DB coach, you don't have a whole lot of input on the scheme. You just coach your guys up for the scheme that your DC has in place. I think they ran a lot more like 2-man and stuff like that. And I think even then, I think Okudah would be solid in that. We'll see, but he's definitely going to have to adjust and work on some of the different parts of the game. I really liked Okudah, but I just didn't think that was a great spot for him coming out. And I'd be weary of drafting the corner top 3 anyways, unless he's like, they're just way different than anything we've seen.
Yeah, you're right. And you're right. Okudah at Ohio State played a lot more, outside leverage, cover 3, read the quarterback, off coverage, all that stuff. I'm with you 100%.
And he excelled at that. He played that so well.
Really good at that. All right, let's go to this next group now. So if the Giants are picking at 42, you're going to have that next group of corners, the Eric Stokeses, and you can throw the slot guys in if you want, the Asante Samuels. I don't know if you like Stokes' teammate. Who do you like in that next group of corners after you get past those top 4 that we already talked about, who I think none of us believe those guys are going to last past pick 40?
Yeah, so Stokes is very intriguing because he's a very explosive athlete. But I know in my notes and in my breakdown I did on my Patreon account, I noted that I knew he was an explosive athlete, but only because when I did like a little bit of research on him, I noticed that he was 100 and 200 meter state champ in high school. So I knew he was a 10-3 guy, but I was saying, hey, I don't think he plays as explosive as he'll probably test. And he tested extremely well. Now, I think he can challenge himself more. Like when you possess, I didn't have that speed. I was a 6'1", 6'2" guy. I was a 4.55 guy. I had to play everything a little bit more honest. Him is like, no, you can challenge yourself more. Like they're not going to run by you. Challenge your speed, challenge your ability to change direction. And I thought he could have did a better job at that. Now, maybe he just doesn't have it in him to do that. But if you can get him to trust his speed more, then you have a terrific cornerback prospect. But he just has to trust that aspect more. I think Campbell, he's another guy that I was going to test well. I think he was like the state 100 meter and 200 meter state champ in like Florida. So, and he played high school football with like Surtain, Marco Wilson, and that receiver, the speedy guy from Auburn. They were all at high school together. He's another guy who I think even with both him and Stokes, I think their press ability is terrific. And I think they challenge things extremely well, but challenge yourself a little more. And I think Stokes has a little bit better natural feet than Campbell. Campbell moves, if I had to guess watching this film on like what I would guess his height and weight was, I'd be like 6'2", 205. That's how he moved. You don't want to move like you're 6'2", 205 though. You know what I'm saying? And he measured in at 6'1", 190. I'm like, I need you. Why are you and the kid Greg Newsome the same size, but he moves much better. So I need, the fluidity is not quite there, but as a day 2 guy, I think he's terrific. I think he'll be a solid corner in the NFL. And then there's a guy who I don't know if he'll go day 2, or I'd assume he'll go day 2 at some point, but not sure 3rd round or 2nd round. But Benjamin St. Juste out of Minnesota, he's intriguing because he when I watch him, I'm like, oh man, this looks like a Keller Witherspoon. But I thought he had more natural aggressiveness than a Keller. But for somebody that's 6'3", 200 pounds, I thought he had good feet from off coverage. They played a ton of quarters with him. And so he had to challenge himself in space. Thought he did a really good job getting in and out of his breaks, not taking too many wasted steps. He played a little bit longer, but it's like, you're 6'3", 200 pounds. Like, what are you going to do? His ability to be aggressive at the line of scrimmage, use his hands, or sometimes just use his feet to get in position. I thought he did that well. There was a play I saw that challenged his hips because I'm really big on like, okay, well, how's his fluidity? And the quarterback threw the ball away, but he was running this way. And when the quarterback threw it away, he quickly flipped his hips and ran that way. So those are the things I kind of pay attention to. But I'm like, oh, I like that. I noted that. I put that in my breakdown of him. But those are the little things. I like him a lot. If I don't know if he'll go in the top 40, but if a team took him in that range, I wouldn't be mad at that.
All right, I got two kind of more generic questions now. For corners, and this goes back to kind of our discussion on Okuda, how much should teams be drafting these cornerbacks based on how they want to use them now? Because to me, the skill sets, if you want a guy to play cover one compared to if you want the guy to play off, the bail on the cover three or zone, I feel like the skill sets you're asking for can be very different based on the scheme you're playing. So how much do teams really need to customize how they eventually, rank and stack these players on their boards based on how they want to use them relative to the skill sets of these players?
Yeah, I think it's all about like how you plan on using them, because you can look at Nnamdi Asomugha on the Raiders and it's like, oh man, this is a shutdown dude. Like he's just shut down, like can't miss, like wow. And then he goes to a different scheme in Philadelphia and it just does not work. He looks like one of the worst corners in the league. Then the Niners get him and put him in Fangio's defense, and that doesn't work for him. Like that's not who he is. So I think scheme definitely matters. That's why I talk about like Greg Newsome. I'm saying like the most scheme versatile corner in this class, because now you can take somebody like him and it doesn't matter what scheme he fits in it. But there are some other guys that they're definitely going to be a little bit more scheme dependent. And but I think that should be a big part of your evaluation. Like, how does this guy fit in with what I do? Now, different positions like quarterbacks. Like quarterbacks, I feel like offensive coordinators should be good enough to be like, no, like let me create my offense around this guy, like this quarterback. But corners, defensive coordinators, they're going to run their scheme and do the things that they want to do, and they're not going to veer too far away from that. So I definitely think, yeah, you don't just draft a corner because you feel like, oh man, he's just really talented. If you draft J.C. Horn and put him in the wrong scheme, people are gonna be like, dang, Croc, you say he was the best corner in his class. Well, I'm like, well, I didn't tell them to play him like that. I didn't tell the Broncos to draft him. So, those are things too that, you gotta like, I think it's the best. Like, if I'm picking 8th or 9th and I'm the Broncos, no, Broncos, do not take him. If I'm the Broncos, I would take Newsome before I take Horn, even though I like Horn much more. So, yeah, the scheme, I think, definitely matters.
All right, the final question. I'm not trying to discount the importance of speed, because if you use it right, to the point before, and you leverage it right, it's the ultimate weapon. But the more and more I watch and I see how the NFL is becoming a league where you almost win as much horizontally as you do vertically, Croc, I feel like the change of direction stuff is so important now. And I think you are seeing, to some extent, some of these positions shrinking a little bit, and guys, linebackers getting faster and quicker, right? Receivers coming out, they're faster and quicker. How much for you, as someone that played the position, is that hip flexibility, that change of direction, really becoming king of the mound even more than that straight ahead speed?
Yeah, I think ultimately it depends on just, again, like how you are going to use this guy. Now, if this is going to be a guy that you plan on saying, hey, I might have you do some matchup stuff, and if you have to play in the slot, especially somebody that might have to line up in the slot at times, when you're in the slot, it's difficult. The receivers have two-way goes, and there's a lot of space. So, you get caught up in space with a guy and you're a little tight-hipped, it's not really going to look good. Think of Richard Sherman. I think Richard Sherman has done a tremendous job he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He should be one of the best corners of my generation. But I don't want to line him up in the slot. You notice Richard Sherman is like, you know what? I'm good over here. This press bill, I can read concepts. Let me do that. He, when they did start matching him up, he can match up with a certain style of guy, but he can't, Dez Bryant, I think he did good competing with Dez Bryant in the slot. Odell Beckham, no, like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see Odell go in the slot and Richard Sherman go in there with him. So again, I think that ability to really have the change of direction and everything, it depends on who. Some guy, again, I keep going back to Greg Newsome. I wouldn't mind. I think he has the feet and the speed and everything. There are other guys too, in the corner I didn't mention, Kelvin Joseph. There was a lot about his film that I did not like, but his ability is not one of them. I think he has to really get better with his eyes. I thought his eyes made him late on driving on receivers. He is out at the top of the break. He'd get his eyes back to the quarterback and sometimes not even drive the man. But his ability, I think you can line him up anywhere. I think his feet are terrific. Changes direction. I think he looks like a terrific athlete. but his eyes were just bad. But he's somebody who is like, hey, if I want to line him up outside, I think he's fine there. Line him up inside, he's fine there. He just has to get better with his eyes and what he's doing mentally.
All right, Croc, tell the folks where they can find your work and everything that you're up to.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at Eric_Crocker. I also have the Crocker Report with a bunch of my guys, man. I have a great team. They put out great content. There's a podcast. If you guys go to Crocker Report, at Crocker Report on Twitter, bunch of good like content on this stuff from a great team. My guy DP NFL does an amazing job there. My guy John Hagler, like those dudes are killing it. And then I have my Patreon account, which all these things I'm talking about on these breakdowns. If you guys subscribe to my Patreon, patreon.com/Croc Talk, you can actually see like the visual of everything that I'm talking about right now. Pretty much on every prospect we've discussed so far. You guys can see all that broken down. So that's where you guys can find me.
Croc, great stuff, man. Great getting to know you. Great talking to you. Let's do it again next year leading up to the draft, and stay safe out there, my man. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you for having me on.
That's Eric Crocker. They call him Croc. He joins us today on Giants Huddle Podcast. We thank him for joining us. It's all on the Giants Podcast Network, presented by Investors Bank, on the Giants mobile app at giants.com/podcast and your favorite podcast platforms. For Croc, I'm Schmeelk. We'll see you next time, everybody.